Welcome to For Those Who Get It, a podcast not just about disabled people, but for disabled people. I'm your host, Liam Nelson, and I'm here with the amazing Tina Friml.
Hello.
My first ever episode, I thought, who better?
I know, what an honor.
A fellow disabled comic, someone who gets the exact life experience that I go through on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Almost parallel. So it's thank you for being on the show.
Oh my gosh. Any opportunity to talk about myself is...
You got to do it. I mean,
yeah.
What's the point of being disabled if you don't get a couple extra opportunities to talk about
being
you?
Being a disabled comic, your career is to just yak about yourself.
Exactly. It makes it worth it. I mean, so speaking of talking about yourself, so Tina, what do you have? What is your disability? Like, how would a doctor describe what you have?
I have cerebral palsy, but I have what some may describe as a mild case.
Okay.
So cerebral palsy is a muscle condition. It's not a disease. It's a condition, and which means that it does not get worse, nor does it get better.
Okay.
It's just was a brain injury. So I have what would be considered a mild case. In that I don't operate day to day using a wheelchair, any kind of walker, or power chair.
Right.
Mainly it affects obviously how I speak
Yeah.
and my fine motor skills.
I think that's like an official definition of what it is. Is there a definition you give to people casually whenever they ask you what you have? Like, what's an easier way that you explain it?
Oh man, well, it really depends on the context, but usually whenever I have to say it, people either directly ask, they're like, "Hey, so what do you have?" I just say it's cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
And everyone's got a cousin that has cerebral palsy.
Okay.
Apparently.
I have Marfan syndrome. Mine are typically a dead relative. It's real fun. That's been a new trend of like, oh yeah. my uncle had that.
Oh no.
I was like, oh cool.
Oh, they had that.
I'm so glad that I know that now.
I've got that too, actually. I've gotten oh yeah, my cousin had it.
Because is cerebral palsy a thing that often kind of goes in a darker direction, or is it a thing that can kind of just be lived with for the most part?
Cerebral palsy often is people get afflicted by it along with other things. The common misconception about CP, or cerebral palsy, is that it affects cognitive, it's kind of like autism.
Yeah.
Or it's like a mental disorder, which it's not, but a lot of people think that because it's so commonly had with things like autism or other developmental disabilities. A lot of times people will have CP along with another kind of degenerative disease or cognitive disease or
so it's like a correlation, not a causation.
Exactly.
Thing, but they're so used to seeing them one and the same.
One and the same that often people who are very, very affected by CP are also a lot of times affected by things that unfortunately do affect the length or quality of life.
Right.
I have had to have the conversation even with friends like, hey, this is not gonna get worse.
Yeah, I'm as bad as I'm gonna get.
Yeah,
right now.
I always say it doesn't get any better than this.
Yeah.
But it's also this is just it.
That's interesting. So, because I think my experience is a little opposite with that, where mine is degenerative over time. So mine does get worse as it ages.
Yeah.
But yours, I could imagine, especially as a comic, how frustrating it must be for people to assume that it's this lack of things to say rather than a difficulty expressing those things.
Yeah, because it affects how I speak. That's by far the number one thing that people associate or assumption people make is that I'm I'm autistic.
Yeah. It's like an infantilization almost.
Oh, yeah, completely, you know. Well, when I was younger, it used to be like they would talk kind of down to me slower. Now that I have, like, a career and I am a public figure, it has changed.
You shouldn't have to be a public figure to be seen as, like, a full person. That's crazy. You have to become a comedian with a public platform for people to be like, oh, wait. That's Tina. That's not a person with cerebral palsy. That's Tina.
After I hit 100,000 followers.
There you go. That's all you got to do to get...
People started talking to me like a person.
Either get 100,000 followers or be born not disabled is how you get to that same level.
Either or. This is all just catch up.
I know with me, I get a lot of offers for like help on certain things. Are there things, like what's a thing that you do appreciate help on and don't appreciate help on?
Well, you know, a lot of I've got amazing friends and partners and oftentimes there is kind of a moment where they're honest and they say, can you just one time can you help me know when to offer help and when to not?
That's nice.
Which is so, like, that kind of thing, just...
Communication.
Huge. At the moment, I live in Bushwick. I'm in the polyamory scene and kink scene, and people are so hyper-communicative. Yeah. And it bleeds into this, like, they're fantastically communicative about, you know, my disability and, like, what do I need? How can I help?
Because they're already kind of existing in a non-traditional space when it comes to relationships.
Exactly.
So it's like, oh, throw an extra, curveball in there.
Sure,
why not? Yeah.
You still, like, when they're a little bit out of the element, they communicate. Yeah. And they ask.
So just like a different coping strategy with, like, difficulty in your life is they face it with communication versus shutting down and being like, no, this freaks me out.
Or thinking they have to assume. I think people that are in these scenes, they know, don't assume, simply ask. And
consent is also a thing that makes sense within asking for help too. Like, oh, I don't need you to assume that I need to not be invited from this social event because I'm disabled.
Exactly.
That's you assuming things about my body that, like, it's crazy at the end of the day.
And it's really refreshing because, I mean, all my life, that really defined a lot of my childhood was people assuming what I could not do, what I could not handle.
Yeah. As a kid, it was, I assume, just as, like, prevalent as it is now, like something that kids would notice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 100%. Well, so the way that my family handled it, like my mom and dad and brother, they I was in speech therapy and a little bit of physical therapy at the beginning. But other than that, I was just a kid. They put me right into a normal private school with all other kids, and so for a long time I didn't know what was happening because when I talk, like right now as I'm talking to myself, I sound normal.
Right.
And so it will be like every now and then a new kid would say to their mom and dad, like, hey, why does she talk so weird? And that would catch me so off guard.
Yeah.
But when you're like a young kid, they're not like, ew, why do you? Yeah. They're just curious.
Oh, that's Tina. She talks like that.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. But then in like middle school, high school, that's when the bullying.
Well, it's that level of like learning, like self-awareness almost gets developed, and then their level of self-awareness is like, oh, I want to be popular, so how do we find who's the most different here? Like,
exactly.
Yeah, they get a collective sense of self, not just an individual sense of self.
In grade school, it's not a weakness; it's just a difference. Like my mom, I remember as a kid, my mom said to me, like, oh, if other kids ask, just say, oh, well, I have an accent. And it's just, and it worked.
Yeah.
Like I would actually do that, and the kid would be like, okay,
Yeah.
and that's it. But
That's so smart.
yeah, but then you know, when you're older and the teen now knows that like you're different because you're disabled and
Now you're disabled and Italian.
exactly double whammy.
can't have both. That's
Disabled and check.
So I guess it was like people were more willing to accept it in that super early phase of life, probably less willing in that teenage to adolescent kind of phase of life.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
how is the transition back into adulthood been? Like what kind of, because I imagine with touring, I meet so many characters with so many different ways of approaching me.
Sure, yeah.
I can't imagine what you go through every time you show up to a venue.
It really depends.
Yeah.
You know, and like again, you and I have this like interesting perspective in that we're front facing
Yeah.
public figures, so when we go into a venue,
Yeah.
they know who we are.
Yeah,
So
we
it's a
advocate
nod
online
thing.
beforehand. They're like, hey, here are things that we need to kind of.
Exactly, but like I mean, college and beyond.
Yeah.
Mainly, what would happen was people would think I'm drunk or on drugs.
Yeah.
And
sometimes you might have been.
so one time I was in London in my early 20s, and I was at a bar and met a group of people that I befriended, and they were all like, "Oh, let's go to this other club." And so I followed them, and I was, you know, drinking, and I got stopped at the door. They all went and I got stopped at the door, and the bouncer was like, "I can't let you in." And I'm like, it sounds like a joke. It's real. It's like, I can't let you in. And I'm like, oh, no. So I'm actually disabled. So that's... And the guy says, you are literally holding a cup of wine. Right? I'm like...
Damn.
You got me.
There's only so far the disabled card can go. Like.
You know, last time I was in Vegas alone working. And I mean, people, whenever I'm walking around Vegas, people, I mean, and they comment. Like, they think I'm so drunk.
Is it to you or about you or what is it like? Are they like talking to one another where you can kind of hear it, or is it they come up and say things to you?
They come up and say things. Yeah, like,
and
I think it's like they think I'm so drunk
that they can say whatever they want to.
They can just say whatever the hell they want. Like, so it will be like, oh, someone have fun, you know?
Oh my God.
and you know, I admit that, like, I used to think it was funny.
Yeah.
But, like, now that I'm actually a little bit older, it pisses me off so badly.
Well, because it's like, it's only so many times a thing can be funny before it becomes, like, torture, you know?
Well,
like,
yeah, exactly.
What was that, like Chinese water torture where they drip the drop of water on your head over and over again? It's like, yeah, the first 1,000 times it's tolerable, but then you slowly start to lose your mind.
It's like beating a dead horse.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's like in my 20s, it was so, oh my God, they thought it was plastered. And then now that I'm like 31, it's, you know, the last time that happened in Vegas, I was already cranky and I whooped around and I was like, and those are the only times that like I do whip around and
because you can't. I
feel
mean, you
like-
can't have unlimited patience. Like
No.
you can't. At some point, you have to hit your limit, and like I can imagine you're just being tempted to hit that limit every day when you leave the house a little bit. You're like every day you don't whip around and yell at someone is kind of a win. I feel like
right, exactly. I find that like living in New York,
yeah,
you get less of a look.
Yeah, because there's so much stuff
There's
going
so
on.
much stuff
They
going
have
on.
like a guy who's like got his pants off across the street. They got someone like throwing stuff
Exactly.
over there. Like it's like
There's
too much
something
chaos for them to be like,
weird.
oh, weird person. There's 1,000 of those weird people here. Like
There's something weirder always happening around.
it is really like a small town thing because like I'll show up to a small town. I'm 7 feet tall for context, and I will walk into a gas station and like someone will come up clearly like as an ambassador for the
Yeah.
entire rest of the staff of that gas station within 5 minutes of me being there, being like, hey, we've been wondering. Like,
Yeah.
how tall are you? And then I'll give them like a card or something. And then 4 people who I've never met before I leave that gas station will be like, hey, I can't believe you're 7 feet tall. So like and then
Yeah.
like it kind of spreads through the town. You think about like how much those people have to talk about for that day. Like sometimes you walking in could be, oh, remember that drunk lady who came in at 4 o'clock?
Right.
And then they all assumed that and then found out what cerebral palsy is that day.
Oh, 100%. Like, and I sometimes I do wonder what happens unbeknownst to me. That
Yeah.
like, you know, I walk into a gas station and I walk out and they talk amongst themselves like, oh my gosh, we're plastered. And then the next time I come in, they're like mortified
Yeah.
in front of each other. I wonder what happens.
I mean,
That
so
don't know.
I have not great hearing, but I do tend to grab when people are talking about me in public.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten really good at that to the point where I can like tell when a group of people is discussing me from across the room. It happens a lot. And I imagine if they're talking about me, they're probably also talking about you. It's just like
yeah.
but the boldness of them coming up to tell it to your face is something that I don't experience because they see me as like a basketball player they want to like potentially be friends with one day.
Yeah,
They see
yeah.
you as a drunk lady. They can kind of like, oh, whatever we say to her won't
Right,
last
right.
till the morning. Like,
Exactly. She's not gonna remember. She
Yeah.
can. Well, yeah. I mean, with you, it's like I could only imagine how. I mean, and you talk about this on
Yeah.
stage. How many times you're
Hundreds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hundreds.
And it's like,
How
and
tall
it's
are
a different
you?
tone. So it's
Yeah.
like yours is like much more like they're judging you. Mine is like there's this sense of like hope in their eyes. They're like, oh, I'm meeting a basketball player. Maybe he'll remember me one day, and like
Interesting.
I'll be able to say that I met the guy who's on the TV.
On the NBA.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very like they're trying to like capture a moment for themselves every time they meet me, and I'm just like utterly disappointing these people. Every time I'm like, no, I don't play basketball. They go, oh. I mean, I had a
Oh,
dude at Six Flags
interesting.
threaten to put me out of my misery if I didn't start playing basketball right
Oh,
now,
man.
which is a death threat. That's a death
Yeah,
threat.
yeah,
My
yeah.
misery is living.
Oh my god.
It's like, that's scary.
That's what?
People get so passionate about it.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
People don't know what to say,
Yeah.
but that doesn't stop them.
Yeah.
Like they have to say something. When they talk about like, oh, are you an athlete?
Yeah.
And you say like, actually, no,
The
I'm
opposite.
offensive. Is there ever like a tinge of like, I kind of want you to feel bad?
So a little bit, yeah. I mean, sometimes like when it's the people who like come up to me at comedy shows and ask me like why I don't play basketball, I was like, what do you mean why don't I play basketball? You just saw me do what I do for a living. You're saying I'm not good enough at that to not also do basketball on the side?
Then why are you asking?
I'd be
that
like,
I'm
no,
not a
actually, do you remember that
model?"
heart condition I just talked about for 10 fucking minutes? Like maybe that's why
Yeah, put
I can't
two
play
and two
basketball.
together.
Like it's very, I literally say I can't play basketball on stage in several of my jokes. Like when I'm headlining, sometimes people come up and be like, so you really can't play basketball after my set?
Oh my god.
I'm like, what? Were you just like staring at me the whole show? Like you didn't hear anything I said? Just kind of like eyes glazed over, like, wow, he's tall, just over and over in your head. Because it's, I mean, people really like, they kind of short circuit. Another thing I was going to ask you about is, I know there's a lot of, like we were talking about earlier, aspects of disability that benefit comedy because, I mean, because there's such a distinct perspective that is different from most people's perspective on just about every interaction you have in your life, which I mean, I feel like goes back to what we were just talking about with the social interactions. Most people don't have to field 1,000 strangers talking to them every month, you know?
Right, exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, I never have to worry about stealing a joke
Yeah.
or like having a joke stolen
Yeah.
from me, except for with the one time that there was a comedian who we had. It was interesting. We had totally different setups, but kind of the same word for word, the same punchline.
Dang.
And we actually became friends.
Nice.
We're now like really, really good friends.
Yeah.
Do you know Pamela Schuler?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So she's a fantastic speaker and comic,
Okay.
and she's Tourette syndrome, and she's also 4'3".
Yeah.
I know about her for a while, and I had like a friend crush on her, and that like, oh, if I knew her,
Yeah.
I bet we would get along so well.
Yeah.
And then yeah, she DM'd me.
I feel like if you write the same joke, that just goes to show you how similar your lives really are. Like it's like, we have to be friends. We landed on the same joke about our lives.
Yeah, it was
like
kind of like dating with a disability.
Yeah.
And just dealing with, it was kind of like dealing with guys that say that they're open-minded, but you're like, are you really? Let me put that to the test.
Yeah.
Hello.
I love your joke about that. That's a fun one. Do you have any people who you've connected with via disability who you are almost a completely different person than? Because like, just to give you context, my life, I've gone to like Marfan Conference, which is like this nonprofit puts together a conference of people with Marfan syndrome, and they all come together. But like the Marfan syndrome is the only thing that brings people together. So there's no other agreement on political ideation. There's like the way of life, religion. Like it's just the most diverse group of people who have one genetic disorder who bring them all together. Do you have anyone in your life who you have like a connection with because of disability and not really outside of that?
Well, I wouldn't say it's so much so like we're like so different.
Yeah.
But I mean,
or someone you wouldn't have met without disability.
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of influencers also that like we're kind of mutual friends now.
Yeah.
Chelsea, she's actually a pretty big influencer on Instagram, and she has cerebral palsy. Her account is entirely informational and inspirational.
Yeah.
And she'll post some funny things, but it's certainly not meant to be a comedy account.
Right.
And I've always, and she's the best. Like she's so sweet, and it's so interesting how we have very different ways of putting out the same experience.
Yeah.
She really does dive into the kind of all her stuff is about travel and her and using her scooter and really inspirational and really authentically, genuinely trying to normalize or educate. Whereas I'm on this other side being like, don't you fucking hate when you're drunk and they think you're even drunker and you're
so she's who they're putting up at the nonprofit conventions, and then you're the one who's like, oh yeah, and we love Tina.
And the cool thing is that like I love what she does and she loves I doing this kind of this weird appreciation for we're covering entirely different bases.
Yeah. And it's important to have both of those bases because you need the people who are going to be a resource about it, and then you need people who are just going to be kind of casually living with it.
Exactly.
Like you're not making it 100% of all your content, and that's like important to show too, that not everyone with cerebral palsy has to be an informational person or a human textbook. Like it's great that she's doing that and getting the information out there to the people who need it, but not everyone has to do that.
Right, exactly.
Just because you have a disability doesn't mean you have to be an advocate in that specific way.
Yeah. And, for a while, I was kind of like, I guess I am an advocate.
Yeah.
And whenever people associate me as a disability advocate, I'm very, honored.
Yeah.
But I do not identify
Yeah.
as an advocate or activist.
I feel like there's a difference between an advocate and a role model, maybe. I think it's like, because, I at the end of the day would love for, a kid with Marfan syndrome to know that they could do comedy, but I'm not necessarily someone who I'm like, hey, live your life how I lived my life, versus like, I think people who are more informational tend to be, a little bit more of like hey, these are what I do every day and follow my life to a T and you'll have a real sustainable life.
Yeah.
Versus like, but I think it goes to show like the real life experience that comes along with disability too. Not everyone's life is like so uniform and normal and like organized, like even if you're a crazy comedian who are known for not taking the best care of themselves, like you can still have a disability. You just have to take these few extra steps to like facilitate that.
Whenever people call me inspirational, it's lovely, but I'm like, man, like if you cut out the CP, there's nothing inspirational.
That is funny.
I eat McDonald's.
That you're an inspiration.
I don't work out. Like, I just kind of do my thing.
It reminds me a lot of like after I got my last major chest reconstruction surgery and I got out of the hospital and there was a certain like real dip in my mood for a while because I realized I had just gotten applauded for like continuing to live for the last 2 months, and then people weren't being like, wow, you stood up, good job. And I was like, man, I need people to clap for me for everything I'm doing again, because this doesn't, like, what? I'm just going to be out here standing up for no applause? Like, are you kidding me?
Do you ever get people, this is so dark, do you ever get people saying something like, oh, I don't know what I would do?
Oh, I get that.
I would just die.
I love this more than I love anything. I couldn't live with if I had. Yeah. Even worse is when people were like, "Oh yeah, they thought I had that as a kid, but didn't have it."
Thank God.
I'm like, "Oh, thank God, thank God you didn't end up with that thing." Happy
God.
For you, buddy. Like, so high five. Like, what do you want me to say to that?
It's a little bit less direct.
Yeah.
But whenever people are like, just had a baby, and they talk about the name and the gender and the weight, and then they're like, and they're healthy and perfect. They're perfect.
Yeah.
I think I talked about that on John Marco's podcast.
Yeah.
But like, it used to grind my gears so much to be like, they're perfect.
Yeah, anything but disabled. Right. I'll take anything with my baby except for disabled.
And, maybe it is me being sensitive, but, like, whenever they say, like, baby's healthy, mom's healthy, they're perfect.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it always was, like, and they're not disabled.
Yeah, well, the word perfect is a crazy, like, that implies that you're imperfect. Like, just by the nature of someone else being perfect.
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
Why
are we setting binaries like this?
Even without the disability context, it's kind of like, it's the only time in your life that you'll be deemed perfect.
Yeah, as soon as you're old enough to have any sort of sentience, they'll start picking you apart. But you're perfect
it's
when you come out.
It's like gender. It's like no, you're gonna come out. It's not imperfect.
Right.
Like, you think they're perfect? Wait. They got something weird.
Yeah, because like you can't always tell if someone is perfect when they're first born. Like that could be a school shooter you just had. Like how do you know your kid is perfect just because they're not visibly disabled?
Yeah.
Like,
well, exactly. And I mean, the reality is every single person has an affliction.
Yeah. I mean, because like just the nature of being alive is like our body kind of trying to kill us a little bit. Like We can't have all.
That's a great quote.
No one has. Yeah, we're all just like entropy means that we're all slowly falling apart. It's just how fast you're doing it. You know.
100% in fun, creative ways.
Yeah, I got a bad hairline and Marfan syndrome, so I'm doubling down on my bad genes. You know.
Yeah, exactly. I see people. I also am iron deficient. Like.
There you go. Add it to the pile.
It's never not something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had any other medical stuff that is like totally unrelated from CP?
I've been very lucky.
Yeah.
In that sometimes I actually gotten shit from friends in my life. And they're always like poking fun at me. But I'm very fortunate that I'm not affected by things like depression or mental health.
God decided
issues.
she's had enough.
Yeah, I kind of like, and it's kind of hard and feels wrong and weird for me to admit that out loud. But cerebral palsy was kind of the thing. It's the thing that I have, and it was really interesting because I've got the opposite experience from a lot of people I know who they're afflicted by, you know, once people get to know me and then they find out that I struggle with depression or I struggle with bipolar or where I'm the opposite. It's just I kind of come out swinging, and then everything else is.
Do you feel like it's at all like cerebral palsy gave you a thing to kind of like focus on that's like a main kind of bad guy almost to like channel some of your frustration? I don't know. It feels like sometimes when people have one really big, you know, traumatic or like stressful thing they have to deal with in their life, it almost distracts from the other things that often develop over time. Like you're so busy trying to like appreciate every day you have with your body, you're not thinking about like the grander scheme of like, oh, well, is it even worth being alive? It's like, oh, fuck that. I'm trying to stay alive. Let's focus on that.
Well, exactly. And that was the thing. I always, my whole life, I saw cerebral palsy as this thing, like this exterior thing that was affecting me. It was like very much, I'm not cerebral palsy. I have it and it haunts me.
Mm-hmm.
How it haunts me is, you know, let's take dating, for instance. Everyone gets rejected.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I was rejected, say I had like a first date and then they said out of that and like, I can't do it, you know, or they ghost or whatever, or they just don't like me, I would always in my head be like, it's because I have cerebral palsy. It is because of that. And one day it occurred to me, if the day ever came when I found out, when a guy actually said to me, oh, well, actually, that had nothing to do with it. You're just kind of a conceited person. I'd be like, what the fuck?
Your whole worldview shatters to the ground.
I'm perfect.
Yeah.
I've got a perfect personality.
Yeah. The doctor looked at me when I was born and they said, perfect, except for the cerebral palsy. That's it.
Seriously,
That's all it is.
It sounds like a joke.
Yeah.
But like literally it like I had this kind of weird ego that was like cerebral palsy was a container of all that was quote unquote wrong with me. And everything else was tens.
Yeah. I mean, you know, at least it's almost like a little box you've created in your brain to throw all your insecurities. It's like, oh, well, that's all just cerebral palsy. That's all that. It's a thing. I like what you're talking about, how, so you've always seen it as like an external thing that's like attached itself to you almost.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's not a part of you.
Yeah, it's
in
a
your
monkey
mind.
on my back.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Do you think that's because of the nature of it being not like a genetic thing? It's because of it being like a trauma-based thing?
Yeah.
Do you think it'd be
yeah.
more like, because I think I've always found like something that made me feel a lot better about mine was really identifying with it to an extent, but it's because it's an inherent part of my genetics, and like if I reproduce, I have to consider that. I have to like,
Yeah.
think about that going forward, and it like will continue to be more and more of a part of my life as life goes on. So it's interesting to talk to you where it's like it's almost like it was the most impactful at the beginning, and then kind of you're working your way
Oh
into.
yeah, interesting. So, did you always identify with it?
No, oh, definitely not. So when I was like 12 or 13, I was 11 when I was diagnosed, and then I was at the time still in the heat of like everyone had told me I was going to play basketball. That was
Yeah.
the thing I was going to do. I never liked basketball, but I was playing it, and I had just started to get kind of good because I was 6'2" when I was 11. And when you're playing against a bunch of 11-year-olds, you're great at basketball when you're 6'2".
Sure, you can bloop.
I just got not afraid of the ball, but then this like diagnosis happened. They said like, oh, no more sports for you, and so I kind of took it as like, oh, sweet excuse to not play basketball. I'm gonna go focus on the things I want to do. But I don't think I realized it really threw me into like a depression, because I remember Googling like Marfan syndrome and seeing that like 30+ year lifespan was like the estimate, which is not the case anymore. It's just
Yeah.
like old research that I found as an 11-year-old with free access to the internet.
What a crazy thing to find as
Yeah.
an 11-year-old.
And it took me till I was 14. I went to my first Marfan conference I was telling you about, and I met literally like hundreds of people, some of them in their like 70s with Marfan syndrome. And I'm like, oh, it took that for me to be able to tell myself like, oh no, there is a future. And then since then, it became like I was much more focused on tackling Marfan syndrome and then just living outside of it. You know what I mean? Like it was like, oh, it's a part of me, so I need to address that part of me. But then I also want to prioritize things that I actually enjoy more.
Yeah.
Because I feel like most people don't get that like slip in the shower moment until they're 75, when they have that like, oh, well, maybe, the world isn't all about working,
Right.
Whereas
Right.
I had that at 11 before I even entered the workforce. So I
Yeah.
was just the most
Yeah.
jaded 14-year-old in the world
my
walking into
God.
high school being like, yeah, so like I could die tomorrow. So
could
like,
go
yeah,
back.
no, make me write an essay. Sure. Like, go for it. Yeah. And I'm going to
Oh
I'm
my
going to skip
God.
school to go make a movie right now. Cause I was just very like,
Well, it's interesting you say that, because, the way that I got cerebral palsy was an event.
yeah.
Like, my birth was traumatic. And so, like, I didn't have cerebral palsy in the womb. It was a after effect of something that happened to me.
Yeah, and it's not a thing that you would potentially pass on to a future generation too, which is, so it's not a thing that's attached to you in that way.
Yeah, very much is a thing that kind of got pinned on me. I say, well, the funny thing that happens when you almost die on your first days, you're living in the bonus round after that. And
That's great.
it really, my whole life, I had this like real kind of lust for life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was in my late teens when I began to maybe think that it could be because it almost didn't happen.
So you had your slip in the shower moment as a baby.
The baby.
You had that. You came out of the womb jaded to the world. You're like, don't tell me what to do. I'm focusing on me.
Yeah, I mean, it was the opposite of jaded. It was kind of like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Well, because I died as a baby. That's and then got brought back, and I've always had this like desire to try everything in life that life had to offer and that the world had to offer, but also like this optimism that I never quite knew where it came from.
Well, you survived something that not a lot of people would have once, like you essentially got in like a potentially like life-threatening car crash and survived as a baby, and then now you're like walking out the other side.
Yeah,
like,
and then it's like, damn.
you got a whole new lease on life.
What do I do now? I can do anything. Yeah, exactly.
There's a big debate obviously around like gene therapy, stuff like that, with like continuing on, and that's a big debate within like the genetic condition community, but outside of that, there is a little bit of a thing where, and this has come up to me because my fiance might also have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is like a similar condition to Marfan syndrome,
Yeah.
where I almost get this like little bit of jealousy at the idea of like a future child having my thing because I'm the disabled one. You know, like, no, you're not, because if you're the disabled one and you're my kid, then you're the most disabled one in the family, and you get all the leeway,
all the attention.
Yeah. Whereas, like, but my whole life it's been me, so it's this like little bit of like, well, I don't want my kid taking all this attention, you know, because like if we both got to get a surgery, then it's just them getting a surgery, me also happening to get a surgery next door.
I got it too.
Yeah.
You do get this, like, you identify as different. Well, I mean, for me, the weird thing that's come up for me in, like, thinking about having a kid was, like, I'm like, what if by sheer coincidence they're also disabled? And then everyone thinks that I passed down cerebral palsy.
And you're like a new patient zero of genetic cerebral palsy.
And I would, to my dying day, be like, oh, this just happened.
No, it's different. We both just happen to get it.
It would bother me more than it should.
Yeah. I mean, so like you talk about it a lot on stage, I think, where you talk about like the idea of like it almost being a little narcissistic when you're disabled. Well, it's like the nature of having a disability requires you to devote so much time and attention to thinking and advocating and talking about yourself that like you train yourself to be a little bit of a narcissist in order to get the care and attention you need, I feel like.
Oh yeah. You like in society it's looked down upon to constantly be thinking about yourself and thinking how you're perceived. But and I think the reason why disability and things like stand-up comedy, the entertainment industry, are kind of hand in hand in some ways. You are constantly thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
And what I always say is, to people that like are sick of me joking about, sick of me talking about being disabled, imagine how I feel.
Yeah.
Like, constantly.
It does feel like there's like an element of like, we have to constantly think about ourselves because the world doesn't think about us.
Exactly.
Like, who's going to do it if not us?
Exactly.
Because, like, the way everything's built, the way everything's, like, formatted, the way everything's, like, ramps are put in, stairs are put in, like, doorways are put in, are just, there's no consideration to us, so we almost have to, like, over-consider ourselves.
Exactly.
And then loudly be like, hey, we're coming through.
Yeah, and you never get so used to it that you don't think about it. Like,
no.
For me, whenever I get looks or weird, I can tell people are kind of like caught off guard. I never not notice it.
Yeah.
And I'll never not notice.
Like, some days you let it roll off your back, and then some days it probably gets to you more, but there's no, like, you stop realizing. Like, it's never that normal, because it's a weird thing objectively. Like, it's not a way to interact in a normal life.
And I think it's kind of like, this is our normal.
Yeah.
So if we're, just going about our, alone in our apartment, we're not thinking about the fact we're disabled.
Yeah.
But the minute we get in front of people,
it's abundantly clear.
Both
by just the building that we're in or the people that are looking at us. What's the, like, so on the topic of like turning kind of disability into a career, what is like the darkest thing you've managed to spin into a thing that benefited you?
Like within my comedy.
Within your comedy, within anything. Like, for example, I'm getting this heart surgery in 2 months, big like open heart surgery, and I'm hoping to write like a half-hour special about surgery, like that I film in a hospital gown in a hospital waiting room. So like just trying to like to directly take something shitty and turning it into something positive.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the answer is clear. It's that, so I tour all over the country, my hour of stand-up.
Yeah.
And, and the big crescendo of that hour is where I tell the story of what happened.
Yeah.
Why I'm disabled, what actually happened, and the traumatic birth, and dying as a newborn, and coming back. And when I wrote that, when I wrote that very much intentionally was taking the darkest part of my story,
Yeah.
the part that I actively did not like to think about or talk about, and really challenging myself, like, can I turn this into comedy? Can I find the comedy in it? The first time I ever told that comedy story was actually at a cerebral palsy
Oh, easy. That's the best. I love performing for disabled events because it's the most receptive audience you'll have in your life.
Well, I was so nervous
Yeah.
that they would kick me out of that for, like, making light of any of it. But after I said it, a woman came up and, I mean, it's a little bit on the nose what she said, but she literally said that her son was disabled due to traumatic birth, and said to me, I never thought I would laugh about anything like this, but you just made me laugh so hard.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just had to hear that one time.
For her especially, I bet it's super cathartic because I bet she feels very alone in the fact that, like, I as a parent, I can't imagine the emotions that come along with having a kid with cerebral palsy, like the responsibility you must feel, and like just the fact that you were directly involved in, like, this kid getting this thing. So I mean, for her to be able to see her child in your shoes one day, be like, oh, it's not like the end of things.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. I just love the audiences that come out to my shows because they're so eclectic.
Yeah.
They're disabled people, and they're parents of kids with disabilities. And then there are kinky people, and then there are poly people, and then, like,
it's a real mix. Yeah, we did Minnesota. It was. I think you saw a good amount of everyone at that one. It was very cool to see.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of crossover. I noticed. I talk a lot about Marfan syndrome in my act, and whenever I opened for you in Minnesota, I asked them how they knew about Marfan syndrome, and half of them were like, "Your videos."
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, okay."
Oh yeah.
So there's like a grander kind of disabled comedy community that seems to be kind of coming together, which is cool.
That's the most fun thing about touring for me is, I post a lot of my comedy online, and you read the comments and see the reactions, but to actually see the people that it's getting to and that it's affecting, and like the wide variety of people that are really resonating with it for a variety of reasons, is really cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see.
Awesome.
I was just talking to another comic, about how your audiences in the comedy world, your audience as a headliner, is a direct reflection.
Oh yeah.
On you,
for sure.
So you'll hear, like, backstage in green rooms, like, oh, that so and so comic, their fans suck.
Yeah.
There's one comic that I'm not gonna say, but he's a great guy, super funny comic, but notorious for his audiences coming and being just chaos.
Yeah.
And whenever people, I'll get people that work at the club saying, oh my gosh, your audiences are so sweet.
Yeah.
They're so great. and they're saying it to me backstage as a compliment
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. It's not like just them saying it. It's about you. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, those people you brought here tonight, like they're
They're
nice.
right.
They're a nice
Yeah,
group of folks. Like,
exactly.
it feels like you're bringing a group of friends to another friend's house, and you're like, oh yeah, these people are awesome.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
nice.
you got good taste in
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anything, last words you'd want someone with cerebral palsy to hear? This is like for any Tina heads out there.
Tina heads. Well, I always tell people, in my meet and greets, when I grew up, I never had anyone like me to look up to. I talk a lot about not wanting to be an inspiration and stuff like this, but I've always kind of wanted to be the person that I didn't have, which was just someone that maybe a young person with a disability could point to and be like, they're doing cool shit.
Yeah.
So I could do cool shit.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So
keep doing cool shit.
Keep
Tina
doing
says
cool shit.
You got to do it. Thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anything you want to plug? Any tour stuff coming up?
I'm always on the road. I'm always touring. I've got an amazing episode on Dropout TV coming out a show called Crowd Control.
Oh, very fun.
So check that out.
Check
it's
that
a
out.
lot of fun.
Crowd Control, very fun. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.